Elder Ven stood on the bridge of his dying ship and watched the stars burn. Behind him, the last 12 vessels of the Corvani people drifted through cold space, their engines damaged, their shields failing. 4 million souls waited in those ships. 4 million men, women, and children who had trusted him to lead them to safety. He had failed them all. The Drekar extermination fleet hung in the distance like a swarm of metal insects. 800 warships, each one designed for a single purpose, to kill. They had been chasing the Corvani convoy for 3 weeks now. At first, Ven had believed they could escape. The Corvani were fast. Their ships were built for running, for surviving. But the Drekar were patient hunters. They had cut off every escape route. They had destroyed the convoy's military escorts one by one. And now they were simply enjoying the hunt. Every few hours, a Drekar battleship would break from the main fleet and destroy another Corvani vessel. Not quickly, slowly. They would tear the ship apart piece by piece, making sure the other refugees could watch, making sure they understood what was coming. Priestess Lyra entered the bridge, her robes dirty and torn from days without rest. She was the spiritual leader of their people, the keeper of ancient wisdom, but there was no wisdom that could save them now. "How many did we lose?" Ven asked without turning around. "The cargo ship Sunrise," Lyra said quietly. 8,000 people. The Drekar broadcast the screams across all frequencies. Ven closed his eyes. 8,000 more names to add to the list of the dead. 8,000 more families destroyed. "We have tried everything," he said. "We sent distress calls to every nearby system. The Amphori refused to help. The Korlax said they cannot risk war with the Drekar. The Galactic Council expressed sympathy but offered nothing." "There is one option we have not tried," Lyra said. Ven turned to face her. He knew immediately what she meant, and his blood went cold. "No," he said firmly, "that is not an option. It is our only option. You know what they are, Lyra. You know the stories." "I know the stories," she agreed. "I also know that 4 million of our people will die in the next few days if we do nothing." Ven walked to the main viewport and stared out at the endless dark. Every Corvani child learned the same lesson before they could walk. There are 3 things you must never do. Never fly into the dead zones. Never make deals with the Shadowborn. And never, ever broadcast on Channel 0. Channel 0 was humanity's frequency. It was the line they had left open when they retreated from galactic affairs 200 years ago, after the Great Wars, after they had shown the galaxy what they truly were. Ven remembered his grandfather telling him stories about the humans, how they had arrived on the galactic stage 3 centuries ago, small and curious and eager to make friends, how everyone had dismissed them as weak and unimportant, how 5 great empires had decided to enslave their colony worlds, and how the humans had responded. The war lasted 11 years. By the end, those 5 empires no longer existed, not defeated, erased. Their homeworlds were burned to ash. Their fleets were reduced to floating debris. Billions died. Species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia simply vanished from existence. The humans had not fought like other civilizations. They did not negotiate. They did not accept surrender. They did not stop until the very idea of threatening humanity was burned out of galactic consciousness. When it was over, the humans looked at what they had done. They looked at the dead worlds and the scattered refugees and the fear in every alien eye, and something changed in them. They left. They went home to their small blue planet. They sealed their borders and fell silent. They left Channel 0 open, a single frequency that anyone could use to reach them. But no one ever did, because everyone remembered what happened to those who angered humanity. "If we call them," Ven said slowly, "we might bring something worse than the Drekar." "The Drekar will kill us all," Lyra replied. "The humans might save us, or they might ignore us, but at least there is a chance. And if they come, what then? What do we unleash upon the galaxy?" Lyra placed her hand on his shoulder. That is not our concern anymore. Our concern is the 4 million people depending on us. The children sleeping in cargo holds, the families praying for rescue. We owe them every chance at survival, no matter how small. Ven looked at the communication console. Such a simple thing. A few buttons pressed, a message sent into the void. It could save them all or doom the entire galaxy. Another explosion lit up the darkness outside. Another Corvani ship dying. More screams on the radio. Ven walked to the console. His hands were shaking. "May the ancestors forgive us," he whispered. He typed the message himself. It was simple. Their coordinates, their situation, a plea for help, nothing more. Then he selected the frequency. Channel 0, the forbidden channel, the line that had been silent for 2 centuries. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes closed in prayer. Ven pressed the transmit button. The signal shot out into space at the speed of light, carrying the desperate hope of a dying people toward the one civilization that every other species had learned to fear. For 3 days, nothing happened. The Drekar continued their slow slaughter. 2 more ships were destroyed. The convoy's remaining vessels huddled together, their crews exhausted, their hope fading. Elder Ven barely slept. He spent every hour staring at the communication console, waiting for a response that might never come. On the 4th day, deep within Earth's solar system, a young officer named Han Siak sat at his station aboard the battleship Thunderfall. He was bored. Nothing ever happened on Channel 0. He had been monitoring it for 3 years, and in all that time, the only signals he had detected were cosmic background noise and the occasional asteroid echo. Then his console beeped. Siak frowned and leaned forward. The signal was weak, distorted by distance, but it was definitely artificial. Someone was broadcasting on Channel 0. He ran the signal through the computer. The translation came quickly: coordinates, a description of an attack. A single word repeated 3 times: help, help, help. Siak stared at the screen for a long moment. His training told him to report this immediately, but part of him hesitated. Did he really want to wake up what was sleeping in Earth's shadow? He thought about the word help. He thought about whoever had sent this message, desperate enough to call humanity despite everything they must have heard about them. He picked up his communicator and called Captain Park Yuna. "Captain," he said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart, "someone is asking for help." Within an hour, the message had reached Admiral Kang T1. The old man read it 3 times, his weathered face showing no emotion. He had served in the military for 50 years. He remembered the last time humanity had gone to war. He remembered the burning worlds and the endless funerals. He had hoped he would never see such things again. But someone had asked for help, and humanity had made a promise to itself, long ago, about what kind of monsters they would choose to be. T1 stood and addressed his staff. "Wake them all up," he ordered quietly. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. We are going to answer that call." Across Earth's solar system, lights began to flicker on. Engines that had been cold for decades roared to life. Soldiers who had grown old during peacetime received orders they never expected to see. Earth's fleet began to move. And somewhere in the darkness of space, Elder Ven felt something he had not felt in weeks. Hope. The first species to detect Earth's fleet was the Amphorae. Their long-range sensor stations were the most advanced in the galaxy, capable of detecting energy signatures across thousands of light years. When the readings came through, the technician on duty thought his equipment was broken. He ran the scan again. The numbers were the same. He ran it a 3rd time, his hands trembling, still the same. Hundreds of energy signatures were emerging from Sol's system. Then the number became thousands. Ships were powering up, one after another, like stars waking from sleep. Each signature was massive, far larger than anything the Amphorae had ever built. The technician called his supervisor. His supervisor called the military command. Within minutes, the information had reached the Amphori homeworld. Their leader, a tall creature with silver scales and ancient eyes, received the report in silence. She read it 3 times. Then she ordered an emergency broadcast to every Amphori colony. "Seal all borders," she commanded. "No ships enter or leave any system. No communications with outside species. We wait and we pray." Her advisors looked at her in confusion. The Amphori had not sealed their borders in 400 years. "What is happening?" one of them asked. "The humans are waking up," she replied, "and we must make very sure that we are not the reason why." News spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every civilization with sensor technology saw the same impossible readings. Earth's fleet was mobilizing. The sleeping giant was opening its eyes. On the Corvani convoy, Priestess Lyra was the first to understand what the sensors were showing. She had been monitoring deep space ever since Elder Ven sent the signal, hopping for any response. When she saw the energy signatures blooming in the direction of Saul, she fell to her knees. Her prayer was one of thanks. Her tears were not. "What have we done?" she whispered to herself. Elder Ven found her there, kneeling before the sensor display, her body shaking. He looked at the screen and felt his heart stop beating for a moment. "They answered," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They answered," Lyra confirmed, "all of them." The Drekar did not know yet. Warlord Thull was too focused on his prey to monitor distant sensor stations. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as his ship slowly destroyed another Corvani transport. He was enjoying himself. The Drekar lived for this moment, the final destruction of an inferior species. It was their purpose, their religion. "How many remain?" he asked his second in command. 11 ships, Warlord. Approximately 3.5 million survivors." "Good, slow down the hunt. I want this to last at least another week. Let them suffer, let them beg." His crew obeyed without question. They had done this many times before. The Corvani were just another species on a long list of extinctions. Far from the battle, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. Representatives from 100 species flickered into existence as holographic projections, their faces showing the same expression, pure terror. The council speaker, a small creature from a world of eternal storms, called for order 3 times before anyone would listen. "We have confirmed the reports," he announced. "Earth's fleet is moving. Current estimates suggest between 2,000 and 3,000 vessels are in transit." Silence filled the chamber. "Do we know their destination?" someone asked. "We believe they are heading toward the Corvani convoy, the convoy that Warlord Thull is currently destroying." More silence, then slowly understanding began to spread. "The Corvani called them," a delegate whispered. "They actually called the humans." "This is a disaster," another shouted. "The humans will destroy everything in their path. We must stop them. We must negotiate." "Negotiate?" the Amphori representative laughed bitterly. "You were not alive during the last war. I was. You cannot negotiate with humans. They do not think like us. They do not fight like us. When they decide someone is their enemy, they do not stop until that enemy no longer exists." The council erupted into chaos. Some demanded military action against Earth. Others wanted to surrender immediately. A few suggested evacuating their homeworlds entirely. Through it all, the oldest members remained silent. They remembered. They had seen what humanity could do, and they knew that nothing in the galaxy could stop what was coming. One of the elder delegates, a being so old that no one remembered his species name, finally spoke. "You young ones do not understand," he said, his voice cracking with age. "You have only heard stories. You have only seen records. Let me tell you what I saw with my own eyes." The chamber fell silent. 300 years ago, humans were like children at their first feast. They smiled at everyone. They offered trade deals and cultural exchanges. They believed the galaxy would welcome them as friends, and the five great empires saw an opportunity. He paused, his ancient eyes looking at something no one else could see. The coalition of five invaded 17 human colony worlds simultaneously. They planned to enslave the population and strip their resources. A simple conquest, nothing unusual for that era. "We know this history," someone interrupted. "You know facts. You do not know truth." The elder's voice hardened. "I was there when the humans discovered what had happened to their colonies. I was there when their broadcasts changed from pleas for help to something else entirely." "What did they say?" "Nothing. They said nothing. They simply began to build. Every factory on Earth switched to weapons production. Every human capable of holding a weapon volunteered. They worked without rest, without complaint, without stopping. In 3 months, they had constructed a fleet larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen." The elder closed his eyes. "When they attacked, they did not announce themselves. They did not send warnings. They simply appeared in orbit above the coalition homeworlds and began firing. The battles lasted days, sometimes weeks. The humans took casualties, but they kept coming. Ship after ship after ship, endless waves of steel and fury." "But they won," someone said. "They stopped when they won." "They did not stop when they won. They stopped when the coalition no longer existed. Every homeworld burned, every fleet destroyed, every leader hunted down and killed. The humans tracked survivors across the galaxy for years, finding them in hiding, bringing them to justice." The elder opened his eyes. When it was finally over, the humans looked at themselves and felt horror at what they had become. They called themselves monsters. They chose to leave, to hide from a galaxy that feared them. But before they left, they made one thing very clear. "What?" "That if anyone ever forced them to come back, they would finish what they started. They would burn the galaxy down to the last world if necessary, and they would not stop until every threat was eliminated." The council chamber was completely silent. "Now you understand," the elder said. "The Drekar have made themselves a threat, not just to the Corvani, to humanity. By attacking people who called for human help, they have challenged the humans directly. What will happen to them? The Drekar will cease to exist. This is not a prediction. This is a certainty. The only question is how many others the humans will have to destroy along the way." Across the galaxy, civilizations that had spent centuries building military power suddenly began sending messages of friendship to Earth. Old enemies became sudden allies. Trade disputes were settled overnight. Border conflicts ended without explanation. Everyone remembered the stories. Everyone had grandparents or great-grandparents who had seen the burning worlds. Everyone understood what was coming. Warlord Thull still did not know. He was too focused on his hunt, too confident in his power. His sensor officers had detected some unusual readings but dismissed them as equipment errors. "Warlord," one of them finally said, "I think you should see this." Thull walked to the sensor station with irritation on his face. He looked at the readings and felt the first cold touch of something he had never experienced before. Fear. The human fleet was coming. Thousands of ships, moving faster than anything Drekar technology could match. They would arrive in less than 2 days. "How many?" Thull asked, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. "We cannot get an accurate count, Warlord. The energy signatures are unprecedented." Thull stared at the display for a long moment. Then he straightened his back and returned to his command chair. "Prepare for battle," he ordered. "The Drekar do not run from anyone." His crew obeyed, but for the first time in his life, Thull saw doubt in their eyes, and somewhere deep inside he felt it too. The humans were coming, and no one in the galaxy could stop them. Warlord Thull had never been afraid of anything. He had commanded fleets since he was young. He had destroyed 12 civilizations and conquered 40 worlds. His name was spoken with terror across 100 star systems. He was the greatest warrior the Drekar had ever produced. But standing on the bridge of his flagship, watching the space ahead of him tear open with light, he felt something cold crawling through his chest. They came out of faster-than-light travel like a wall of metal and fire. First 10 ships, then 50, then hundreds. They kept coming, pouring out of the light, filling the empty space with impossible amounts of steel. The smallest human ships were the size of Drekar battle cruisers. The largest ones were bigger than anything Thul had ever seen. They looked like small moons made of weapons, their surfaces covered with guns and missile launchers and devices he could not identify. At the center of the formation came the flagship. The word Prometheus was written on its hull in letters large enough to see from thousands of kilometers away. It moved with the slow confidence of an animal that knew it had no predators. "Report," Thul commanded, keeping his voice steady through pure force of will. His tactical officer was shaking so badly he could barely read his console. 2,317 vessels confirmed, Warlord. More are still arriving. They have us surrounded. Surrounded? Thul looked at the tactical display and saw that it was true. The human fleet had emerged in a perfect sphere around the Drekar position. There was no escape route, no gap in their formation. They had planned this arrival down to the smallest detail. "Their weapons?" Thul asked. "Unknown configuration. Power readings are. Warlord, their smallest guns have more power than our main batteries. I do not understand how this is possible." Thul understood. 200 years of silence, 200 years of improvement. While the galaxy had stagnated, fighting the same wars with the same weapons, humanity had been building, preparing, creating tools of destruction that made everything else look primitive. A communication signal came through. Every screen on the Drekar flagship flickered and displayed the same image. A human woman in a military uniform, her face calm and cold. "Drekar vessels," she said in perfect Drekar language. "This is Captain Park Yuna of the Earth United Fleet battleship Thunderfall. You are engaged in the unlawful extermination of a civilian population. You have one opportunity to withdraw." Thul's pride screamed at him to fight. Every instinct told him to attack, to show these humans that the Drekar feared nothing. But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered something else. It whispered that there was a difference between courage and suicide. He ignored that voice. "Humans," he broadcast, standing tall before his crew, "you abandoned this galaxy. You have no authority here. These creatures called for your help and you answered. That was your mistake. Leave now or be destroyed alongside this vermin you came to save." There was a long pause. Then a different voice came through the communication channel. It was older, tired, almost sad. "I am Admiral Kang T1, Supreme Commander of Earth's United Fleet." Thul knew that name. Everyone knew that name. Kang T1 had been a young officer during the last war. He had personally led the assault on the Korlax homeworld. He had accepted the final surrender of the coalition of 5. "We gave you a chance," T1 continued. "We always give one chance. You chose to threaten us instead." Another pause. "Fleet actual to all ships, weapons free." The universe exploded. Human ships opened fire simultaneously, thousands of weapons discharging at once. The light was so bright that Thul had to cover his eyes. When he could see again, he watched in horror as Drekar warships came apart like toys being crushed by a giant hand. The Drekar fired back. Their weapons hit human shields and did nothing. Not small amounts of damage. Nothing. The shields flickered briefly and held, absorbing firepower that would have destroyed any other fleet in the galaxy. "All batteries fire," Thul screamed. "Everything we have now." His fleet responded. 800 warships unleashed their full arsenal against the human formation. Missiles and plasma and kinetic weapons streamed across space in a storm of death. The humans did not even slow down. Their ships moved through the Drekar attack like predators through water. They dodged some shots, absorbed others, and kept firing. Their weapons punched through Drekar armor as if it did not exist. Explosions bloomed everywhere Thul looked. On the Corvani convoy, Elder Vin watched the battle in stunned silence. He had expected the humans to help them. He had hoped they would drive away the Drekar. He had not expected this. It was not a battle, it was an execution. Priestess Lyra stood beside him, her hands pressed against the viewport glass. "I do not understand," she whispered. "How are they doing this?" "They are what the galaxy always feared," Ven replied quietly. "They are what happens when you give weapons to a species that never learned to accept defeat." Captain Park Yuna coordinated the attack from the Thunderfalls command center. Around her, officers spoke calmly into their headsets, directing fighters and coordinating strikes. There was no excitement in their voices, no celebration. They were doing a job, nothing more. Lieutenant Han Siok sat at his station, monitoring communications. He could hear Drekar screams on their military frequencies. He could hear captains begging for mercy, officers trying to surrender. "Captain," he said quietly, "some of their ships are attempting to surrender." Yuna nodded. "Admiral T1's orders are clear. Accept all genuine surrenders. Any ship that powers down weapons and lowers shields is to be spared. And those who keep fighting." They made their choice. Most of the Drekar kept fighting. It was their nature. Surrender was considered worse than death in their culture. They had never learned how to stop. Commander D. Ho led boarding parties onto the larger Drekar vessels. His Black Dawn unit was the most elite fighting force in the human military. They moved through corridors with perfect coordination, clearing rooms and securing prisoners. The Drekar soldiers they faced were large and powerful, bred for combat. Against most species, they would have been unstoppable. Against humans in powered armor with weapons 2 centuries more advanced, they were helpless. D. Ho took no pleasure in the killing. He did what needed to be done, protected his soldiers, and moved on. This was not glory. This was just work. The battle lasted 23 minutes. When it was over, the Drekar fleet had been reduced to wreckage. 18 ships remained intact, specifically spared on Admiral T1's orders. They drifted in space, their weapons destroyed, their crews in shock. Dr. Bora Kim, the fleet's xenobiologist, stood at her viewport and watched the debris fields expanding in all directions. She had studied the Drekar for years, trying to understand their culture of conquest and extermination. Now, watching the remains of their fleet floating in the void, she felt an uncomfortable mixture of relief and sadness. "Is it over?" her assistant asked. "The battle is over," Bora Kim replied. "What comes next is much harder." Admiral T1 appeared on the fleet-wide channel. His old face looked tired, but his voice was steady. "Secure the remaining Drekar vessels, provide medical care to their wounded, then let them go." "Sir," Captain Yuna asked, "let them go. Let them run back to their empire. Let them tell everyone what happened here. Let them describe exactly what they faced." The Admiral paused. "Sometimes the best weapon is a survivor who can spread fear." The remaining Drekar ships were towed to a safe distance and released. They fled immediately, their engines burning at maximum power as they raced toward home. With the threat eliminated, the human fleet turned its attention to the Corvani convoy. Medical ships moved forward, their hulls marked with symbols of healing instead of weapons. Rescue teams prepared to board the damaged refugee vessels. Elder Vin watched them approach. His people had been saved. Against all odds, against all logic, they had been saved. But as he looked at the human ships, at the power they represented, at the ease with which they had destroyed the most feared military force in the sector, he felt something else beneath his relief. He felt the same fear that the rest of the galaxy was feeling. The humans had returned, and everything was about to change. The first human ship to dock with the Corvani flagship was a medical vessel called the Morning Light. It was smaller than the warships, painted white instead of gray, with no visible weapons on its hull. But as Elder Ven watched it connect to his airlock, he felt the same mixture of hope and fear that had been living in his chest since the battle ended. The airlock door opened with a soft hiss. A small group of humans entered, led by a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She wore a white coat instead of a military uniform, and she carried medical equipment instead of weapons. "Elder Ven," she asked in perfect Corvani language, "I am Dr. Bora Kim. We are here to help your people." Ven had prepared a formal greeting. He had practiced diplomatic words suitable for meeting the representatives of humanity. But when he opened his mouth, nothing came out. He simply stood there, looking at this small human with her gentle smile, and felt tears running down his face. "Thank you," he finally managed to say. "Thank you for coming." Dr. Kim stepped forward and took his hand. Her touch was warm, her grip gentle. "You asked for help, we came, that is all." Within hours, human medical teams were spread across the Corvani convoy. They brought medicine and food and clean water. They treated the wounded and comforted the grieving. They worked without rest, moving from ship to ship, caring for people they had never met before. Captain Park Yuna supervised the distribution of supplies from the Thunderfall. She walked through cargo bays filled with everything the Corvani needed: shield generators, engine parts, food synthesizers. More supplies than the convoy could carry. "Take whatever you need," she told Elder Ven. "We brought enough for twice your number." "Why?" Ven asked. "Why do you help us so freely? We have nothing to offer you." Yuna paused in her work and looked at him. "Elder, we did not come here for trade. We came because you were dying and you asked us to save you. But the cost must be enormous. These supplies, these ships, the soldiers who risk their lives." "There is no cost," Yuna interrupted gently. "Not for this. Saving people is not a transaction. It is simply what we do." Ven wanted to believe her, but he had lived in the galaxy too long to accept such simple answers. Everyone wanted something. Everyone had hidden motives. Priestess Lyra found him later, standing alone in an observation deck, watching human shuttles move between the convoy ships. She knew what he was thinking before he spoke. "You are wondering what they really want," she said. "Of course I am. No one does anything for free. No one spends such resources without expecting something in return. Perhaps humans are different." Ven shook his head. "No species is different. We all want power, resources, influence. The humans must want something." "Then ask them." That evening, Ven requested a meeting with Admiral Kang T1. To his surprise, the Admiral agreed immediately. Ven was transported to the Prometheus, the massive flagship at the center of the human fleet. The ship was unlike anything Ven had ever seen. Its corridors were wide and clean, filled with humans of all ages going about their duties. They nodded politely as he passed, some offering small smiles. None of them showed fear or hostility. Admiral T1 received him in a simple office, not the elaborate throne room Ven had expected. The old human sat behind a plain desk, a cup of tea steaming in front of him. He stood when Ven entered and offered a bow of respect. "Elder Ven, please sit. Would you like some tea?" They sat together, sipping warm drinks, two leaders from species that had never met before. Ven studied the Admiral's face. It was lined with age and marked by old scars. His eyes held the weight of many memories, not all of them good. "I must ask you something," Ven said finally. "Anything. What do you want from us? What is the price for our rescue?" The Admiral set down his teacup. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. "Elder, 200 years ago, my people did something terrible. We destroyed civilizations. We burned worlds. We killed so many that we lost count." He looked at his hands. "When it was over, we looked at ourselves and were horrified. We had become the monsters we were fighting against. But you won, Ven said. You protected your people. Yes, and in doing so, we lost a piece of ourselves. We learned what we were capable of when pushed too far. It frightened us more than any enemy ever could. The Admiral met Ven's eyes. We left the galaxy because we could not trust ourselves. We sealed our borders and prayed for forgiveness. But we also made a promise to ourselves. What promise? That if we ever had to use our power again, we would use it to protect the helpless, not to conquer, not to dominate, just to save those who could not save themselves. The Admiral smiled sadly. You asked what we want from you. The answer is nothing. We want nothing. We only ask that you remember us not as monsters but as what we are trying to become. Ven did not know what to say. He had expected demands, conditions, treaties. He had not expected confession and hope. You feel guilty, he realized. You help us because you feel guilty about what you did. Perhaps, or perhaps we help because we know what it feels like to be alone and afraid, facing an enemy that wants to destroy you. We will never forget that feeling, and we will never let others suffer it if we can help. Later that night, Dr. Bora Kim worked in a makeshift hospital aboard one of the Corvani ships. She was treating a young Corvani child who had broken his arm during the evacuation. The boy was scared, crying for his mother. Kim held his hand and spoke softly while her medical tools worked. It is okay, she said. I know you are afraid, but you are safe now. No one will hurt you anymore. Promise, the boy whispered. Promise. Priestess Lyra watched from nearby. When the boy fell asleep, she approached the doctor. Your people saved us, Lyra said. But I saw your fleet fight. I saw how easily you destroyed them. Yes, Kim replied without looking up. The Drekar were the most feared military power in this sector. Your ships treated them like insects, like nothing. Kim finally met her eyes. That is why we left, Priestess. That is why we have been hiding. We know what we are, and it terrifies us as much as it terrifies you. Then why come back at all? Why not stay hidden forever? Kim looked at the sleeping child, at his small hand still holding hers. Because someone asked for help, because children like this one were going to die, because all the fear in the galaxy cannot change one simple truth. When innocent people are suffering, we cannot look away. She gently released the boy's hand and stood. We are trying to be better, Priestess. Every day we try. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we become the thing we fear most, but we keep trying, because the alternative is to be nothing at all. Lyra watched her walk away to treat another patient. Around her, human doctors and Corvani survivors worked together, speaking in broken phrases, learning each other's names, sharing food and stories. Perhaps the humans were monsters. Perhaps they were capable of terrible destruction. But Lyra realized something as she watched them care for her people with such gentleness and dedication. Monsters did not hold the hands of frightened children. Monsters did not weep over those they could not save. Monsters did not try to become better. Whatever the humans had been, whatever they might become, in this moment they were something else. They were hope. And for the first time since the Drekar had attacked, Priestess Lyra allowed herself to believe that her people might truly survive. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The surviving Drekar ships raced home, their crews telling everyone who would listen about what they had seen. Their stories were filled with terror and disbelief. 800 warships destroyed in less than 30 minutes. Human weapons that treated Drekar armor like paper. Human soldiers who moved through corridors like ghosts. The Drekar Empire received the news in stunned silence. For 3 centuries, they had been the predators of the galaxy, feared by all lesser species. Now, in a single day, they had learned what it felt like to be prey. Within a week, the Empire recalled all extermination fleets. Every ship returned home. Every campaign was abandoned. The Drekar sealed their borders and prayed that the humans would not come for them next. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions that lasted for days. Representatives argued and debated and made speeches, but everyone knew the truth. The balance of power had shifted. Humanity had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. On a dozen worlds, governments collapsed. Leaders who had built their power on military strength suddenly found themselves facing questions they could not answer. If the humans could destroy the Drekar so easily, what chance did anyone else have? Old conflicts ended overnight. Wars that had burned for centuries were suddenly resolved through diplomacy. Border disputes that had killed millions were settled with handshakes and treaties. Everyone understood the unspoken message. The humans were watching, and no one wanted to attract their attention. The Corvani convoy was escorted to neutral space by a squadron of human ships. Captain Yuna personally supervised the journey, ensuring that her rescued guests had everything they needed for the long trip ahead. Lieutenant Han Siak spent his free time teaching Corvani children human games. He showed them how to play cards and how to solve puzzles. The children laughed and asked endless questions about Earth and humans, and what it was like to live in a place where the sky was blue instead of black. "Do humans really come from a planet with water everywhere?" one girl asked. "Yes," Siak replied with a smile. "We call them oceans. They cover most of our world." "That sounds beautiful." "It is. Maybe one day you will visit and see for yourself." Elder Vin watched these scenes with wonder. His people had been running for so long, hiding from one threat after another, that they had forgotten what peace felt like. Now, surrounded by human protectors, his people were starting to remember. On the final day before the convoy would continue alone, Admiral Kang T1 requested a meeting with the Galactic Council. Representatives from 100 species assembled in holographic form, their faces showing various mixtures of fear and curiosity. The Admiral appeared in the center of the chamber, his old face calm and steady. He did not waste time with formal greetings or diplomatic phrases. 200 years ago, we left because we were afraid of ourselves. We still are. His voice echoed through the chamber. We do not want to rule you. We do not want your resources, your territory, or your worship. We want to be left alone. He paused, letting his words sink in. But we will not allow the helpless to be slaughtered. We will not allow genocide. We will not allow cruelty to go unanswered. The Admiral leaned forward, and something cold entered his voice. So here is our offer and our warning. Live in peace. Settle your disputes without mass murder. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Another pause. The chamber was completely silent. Because if you do not, if you make us come out again, we will not stop at rescue. We will end you. Completely. Permanently. The way we ended the empires that betrayed us 3 centuries ago. He looked around the chamber, his ancient eyes seeming to meet every representative at once. We do not enjoy destruction. We hate what we are capable of becoming. But do not test us. Do not force us to choose between our conscience and your survival, because we learned something terrible about ourselves during the last war. "What?" someone asked in a whisper. "That when we are pushed far enough, our conscience loses, and once we start, we do not know how to stop." The transmission ended. The chamber remained silent for a long time. Earth's fleet vanished back into the darkness of their home system. Their ships powered down. Their weapons went cold. Channel Zero fell silent once more. But nothing was the same. On worlds across the galaxy, civilizations that had spent millennia making war suddenly discovered a new interest in diplomacy. Military budgets were redirected toward infrastructure and medicine. Aggressive expansion plans were quietly canceled. Everyone remembered the Admiral's words. Everyone understood the warning. Elder Vin led his people to a new world, a small planet with green forests and clean water. It was far from the main trade routes, far from the great powers, a quiet place where the Corvani could finally rest. They built new cities and planted new crops. They raised children who would never remember the years of running and hiding. And in the center of their largest settlement, they built a monument. It was a simple structure, a tall column of white stone with words carved in 100 languages. Visitors came from across the galaxy to read the inscription, to remember what had happened in that distant corner of space. The words were simple. They are not gods, they are not demons, they are humans, and they asked only one thing of us, to be kind to one another. Priestess Lyra became the keeper of the monument. Every day, she stood before it and answered questions from curious visitors. "Were you really there?" they asked. "Did you really see the human fleet?" "I was there," she replied. "I saw them, I saw what they could do, and I saw what they chose to do instead." What did they choose? To save us, to heal our wounded, to feed our hungry, to hold the hands of our frightened children. Lyra smiled softly. They could have done anything they wanted. No one could stop them, and they chose kindness. Why? Because they wanted to be better than what they feared they were. Because they believed that power should protect, not destroy. Because, she paused, remembering Dr. Borakim's words from long ago. Because when innocent people are suffering, they cannot look away. In the shadows of space, Earth's fleet waited. The ships were still there, hidden behind the borders of Sol system. The soldiers still trained. The weapons still worked. Humanity had not forgotten how to fight. But they hoped they would never have to again. Admiral Kang T1 retired to a small house by the ocean. He spent his days watching the waves and reading books he had never had time to read before. Sometimes, young officers would visit to ask for his wisdom. He always gave the same advice. "We are what we choose to be," he told them. "We can be the monsters the galaxy fears, or we can be the guardians they need. The choice is ours. Every single day, the choice is ours." Captain Yuna took command of the Outer Defense Fleet. She kept the ships ready, kept the crews trained, but she also started new programs. Student exchanges with alien species, scientific cooperation with former enemies, small steps toward the future she hoped humanity would build. Lieutenant Han Siak eventually left the military and became a teacher. He traveled to the Corvani homeworld and helped them build schools. His students grew up learning both human and Corvani history, understanding both species in a way no generation before them ever had. Dr. Borakim continued her research, searching for ways to prevent conflicts before they started. She believed that understanding was the key to peace, and she spent her life proving it. And somewhere in the cold depths of space, Channel Zero remained open. A single frequency, waiting for a signal, waiting for someone to ask for help. Humanity hoped that signal would never come. They prayed for a galaxy that could solve its own problems, protect its own helpless, build its own peace. But if the call came, if innocent people were suffering, if someone needed salvation badly enough to reach out to the one force no civilization wanted to face, humanity would answer. They would always answer. Because that was what they had chosen to be. Not the monsters of legend, not the destroyers of empires, but the ones who came when called, the ones who protected the weak, the ones who proved day by day that great power could be matched by greater compassion. Earth's fleet waited in the darkness, watching, hopping, ready. The galaxy slept a little easier, knowing they were there. And the inscription on the Corvani monument continued to draw visitors, year after year, generation after generation. They are not gods, they are not demons, they are humans, and they asked only one thing of us, to be kind to one another. In the end, that was all that mattered. Be kind. And if you cannot be kind, at least remember, somewhere in the darkness, humanity is watching. And they will always come when called.